Like I said, I'm just making this very brief because otherwise I'd be here talking about all her accomplishments and we wouldn't get to listen to her at all. But just so you know that she currently resides and maintains her studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. She is a professor of ceramics in the Department of Art and Art History at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And she has exhibited internationally in major museums and has done a number of artist residencies. And I'm going to leave the rest to her. Thank you for being here, Lydia. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for carving out your 10 o'clock time zone time period when you could be having coffee or going for a walk or doing all those other pleasurable things. I usually teach on Monday and Wednesday, so I'm kind of in between classes. But the title of my presentation, and I always think this is what I'm constantly doing, is I'm always on a call to follow my path. So I just share that with you because that's what I'm constantly doing. And I think we're always on a path to somewhere or something. So I received my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the Ohio State University. And my Master's of Fine Arts degree from New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University. And just after that, when a lot of my classmates were looking for teaching positions, I just felt that, yes, I could probably teach technical, I could probably teach studio, but I think a lot of what we teach and how we teach is based on experience. I just felt at that time, I needed to have some more experience with my own work. So I applied for a Fulbright Hayes research grant, and I was awarded the grant for a 9-month period to go to Nigeria. And I was really more interested in Adobe architecture and probably less so much interested in the vessel at the time, because this is the kind of work Adobe structures were informing my work. So I'm just putting this in before I go back, before I start talking about the work. But when I returned back from Nigeria, and this was back in the day, that was in 1983, and I went to Nigeria for 1 year I think it was 1985 to 86. And at the time, a lot of these SUNY schools, so this is a consortium of schools in New York State, they had created these educational opportunity programs. These are for children or students who came from what we would, at the time, they were referring to them as a disadvantaged background. But what it really essentially meant is that they qualified financially and academically for receiving support from programs like this. And so I think Alfred University was the last SUNY or state school that implemented one of these educational opportunity programs. And of course, anyone who's been to Alfred, especially my dear friend Sana, that is a very difficult place for people to exist for 4 years. We did it. We were only there for 2 years, but we were more mature going to Alfred. But you take a kid from the city or from an urban environment and bring them to this really small town is very difficult. But I felt compelled to recruit students to come to this program because I believed in the university. I believed in the academic programs that we offered. So I stayed there. So as soon as I came back from Nigeria, I went back to Alfred and I worked there for 3 years. And I said, okay, that's enough. I have no love life. I have no life. And it's time for me to, to kind of spread my wings a little bit and really try to see what this administrative experience could do for me professionally. And so I did take a position as Assistant Dean of Multicultural Affairs and Affirmative Action Officer at the Art Institute in Chicago. And then I was actively recruited by Virginia Commonwealth University. And so I ended up going to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, as the Assistant Dean of Undergraduate Studies. And I stayed there for 19 years. And then after that, I wanted to kind of switch a little bit and maybe take on another type of challenge. And I went to Mississippi State. And for those of you who know the history of Mississippi, it's not beautiful, it's not wonderful, it's there was a lot of racism during the civil rights movement. It was in the deep South, and my people are from Mississippi. And my aunt, for the life of her, she says, "Why are you going back to Mississippi? That is just not the place for you to be." And I said, "Well, they have running water and they have indoor plumbing. I'll be fine." So I stayed there for about 4 years. And then again, I was recruited to go to Texas Tech School of Art as the director. Stayed there 5 years. And then as I'm thinking about where I would want to be in terms of retiring, I decided to take another position as chair at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. So this is where I am. I did 1 term, and now I'm a full professor in teaching ceramics. So I'm probably in my very best happy place right now. So I'm really enjoying being back in the classroom. That was a long story, but that's a lot of stuff going on in my life. And so just to kind of give you a brief background about me and those people who influence, who have made a real impact in my life, they've been my ancestors, my grandparents and my parents. My grandmother, she was a domestic, as was both of them. That was the kind of work. This is what these women did back in that time period. But the wonderful thing about them, at least having been in those positions, is they really understood how to work with their hands. And so both of them, they sewed, they made quilts. And so I think what I found interesting about them is watching them work. My mother also worked with her hands. She knits and crochets. So worked in textiles and different what we call textiles now. So I think that's what my takeaway was, is seeing craft being made just on a very regular basis in the home. You know, who knows what their lives would have been like if they had the same opportunities as me. These are on the left side are the authors that I am really that I read their work all the time. But this is where I'm inspired by their writings. Some of them are poets, some of them are writing science fiction, some of them are writing about the history of African Americans in the United States. So it's history, it's fiction. So it helps me to fantasize and how to realize how we exist in different spaces. To the right are just these wonderful artists that inspire me. They inspire me, not only the work that they do, the path that they're on, the energy that's in their work. Some of them are not with us anymore, but these are the people that trigger and keep me interested in the field, just because of the way they may talk about their work, the way they contextualize their work. So these people are really interested in me. And this list, it changes constantly. But I just think, and these artists are generational. They're some of them have been in the field for many years, and some of them not so much, and not all of them are ceramic artists. These are the 3 objects that constantly I refer to in my work. The one is a hair pick. The center one is a bowlie, which is kind of it's this amorphic form. And it is out of Mali, and it's using all different kinds of organic materials. There's blood, there's soil in this, straw, and they have these great powers. The one, and I like this shape because it's always changing, which I think is a good part of our life, how we occupy space. The one to the far right is a heddle pulley, and these are objects that you find in West Africa that are they have an association. They're part of the weaving, the weaving loom, and they're passed down from generation to generation. And I think that's how we know who we are as people, by the information that is passed down to us from our ancestors. So these are the pieces, and Sana might remember these. She was helping me in the gallery pack these things up, and it was next to impossible to pack this work up. I mean, I just think we're so much brighter and smarter and more intelligent now than we used to be. But I mean, and here I was trying to not only pack my studio, but pack up my artwork and pack up my apartment. to go not just to Columbus, Ohio, but to leave the country. And so some of these pieces, a lot of these pieces I don't even have anymore. I don't know where they are. It was just, and I've learned that that's part of what we do as artists, as ceramic artists, is, we're able to hold on to things, and, it's really about that moment. And so these were face jugs. And so I was really interested in really learning more about my African heritage and my African-American heritage and of enslaved people. And so these things kind of struck a chord with me. So you have the raffia grass skirt or grass roof. And then I actually put the face jugs on top of that. So I was using kind of some found materials in some of these pieces, trying to bring some of that into the work as well. When I arrived in Nigeria, again, I was really interested in working with these huts and adobe huts. And I just love the way the earth looks in terms of forming these organic forms, and organic forms that people actually live in. So I just think of them as being these living, breathing objects that are part of our life. So it's just taking it a step further in terms of thinking about them as they're not just houses, but they actually have a lifespan of themselves. And when I was driving around in Nigeria, I noticed how everything kind of deteriorates at the same rate in terms of, first the roof falls in, then the walls fall in, and then, and it's interesting because you find very similar structures like this in the United States, where I'm talking about the two slides to the left, where things are it just takes that one last push, but no one is wanting to do that. So I think that happens a lot in families, as families are inheriting properties, not knowing what to do with these properties or these buildings, but also thinking about them as human beings and not wanting to be the person that tears it down. So they just start to naturally deteriorate in the environment. So this is me. In this, I'm working with a group of men. I'm in Jos Plateau State. And it was really interesting because, had I known now if I knew what I know now, and back then, I would have known that they go to the mosque on Friday at noon. So everybody stops working, but I'm just wanting to work the whole day, because that's what our art practice is, right? We work all day. And they're like, no, we'll see you next Monday. So bye, and I'm out there working, and I'm thinking, well, the day's only half over. But it was really great because I was working with a team of builders, and this was actually at the Jos Museum. And so they had a lot of architectural adobe replicas of these forms. So some of the students from the architecture department would come out and visit me. And I said, you guys need to jump in and do this. This is great. This is part of your culture. But I really, really enjoyed the process. So to me, this is just like hand building on a large scale. This is one of the pieces, which is something that is not really a hut that they would have, but I was really trying to make it look more like a figurative piece of work. And those are just some of the shards that I found out around the land, around the site. So when I came back from Nigeria, and this job was waiting for me in New York State, and I was finding it really difficult to continue to maintain a studio practice in ceramics. And so I started working in paper. And I was really, I was a little devastated because, sometimes you feel like if you're not working in the material that you so-called, you have a master's degree in, you feel like you're not making art anymore. And so I decided what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to, retool, redirect myself, because what's really important is to continue the exercise of using your hands. And so this is just cut paper with foam board, and I would put them in shadow boxes. So I actually started working a lot with paper because, as you can see, the jobs that I had required me to be at work. I mean, Anna knows this better than anybody, I think, and possibly Sam, but how much time you spend doing administrative work. And so I just started really working with these paper pieces. So these are hair picks. So I'm still thinking about those things that really inform my work. It doesn't matter if it's paper or if it's clay or whatever the material is. These are still some of the images that I really enjoy that impact and inspire me. So these are just a series of hair picks that I did. And these were anywhere from 14 to 22 to 18 to 24 inches. My ex-husband, he was an illustrator, and he got me really involved in doing some illustration work. He said, well, they'll love your cut paper pieces. So, why don't you do that? And so I would get into shows and, get awards and things. I was like, oh my gosh, I am really heading in the wrong directions. I don't want to start getting awards and getting known for being an illustrator, because I'm not an illustrator. That's a really different mindset. But it did help me to continue to work and just learn perspective and learn space, and so all those things that we learned when we were in our undergraduate. So it really helped. So I'm just showing you a little bit of the process. So I usually start with a line drawing, and then I start cutting this. And these pieces are really large. Well, they're about 48 inches high. And then, so instead of putting them on foam board, I'm using insulation board. So you can see just from the side, like how thick they are. And these are watchers 1, 2, and 3. And this is all about how I'm thinking of our ancestors who are maybe in space, or, dealing with some more astrological way of our spirits existing and kind of floating in the sky above us. So just kind of really thinking about that. The center one, and sometimes what happens is I over embellish. That's what I call it. I think, I'm pulling back from some of that. I think sometimes I can really get carried away, and it's like it's too much. And so, when you're working in your studio, you don't know what's too much. You don't have a teacher. You don't have, you don't have you're not in a residency where you can say, Sana, what do you think? And she's like, pull back. Or Rebecca said, no, keep it going. So, it's just trying to figure out when it's done. And so that's always been kind of an issue, because with paper, you can just keep adding more and more and more. So I did a series of these figures as well. And these are the figures that are directly influenced by that heddle pulley. And so these are anywhere from 34 to 48 inches in height. I make them in 2 sections. I use a very colorful palette for these pieces. And again, it's about that storytelling of how you're passing a story down from one generation to the next. I also, and I don't know how it is for some of you, but it's very difficult for me to just stick with one kind of series. I'm usually working on 2 or 3 things at a time. And these are the carts, the migration carts. And so I'm also thinking about what happens when people are migrating from the south to the north, the Great Migration, and my grandparents were part of that. What are those things that you have to bring with you? So when you arrive, you can start setting up your house, and what do you use to embellish your home? And so they're open like this, so you can see what's inside of them, what's missing. And this was the beginning of working on those pieces, and they've since have evolved. But I put them on the wheels, so because at that particular time, there were people who would migrate north, and they would find out that they couldn't make it, or they didn't have what they needed, and they would move back down south. I'm just showing you an installation. This was in Omaha, Nebraska. I had this show, but just seeing how I envision my work. I see the figures, the heddle pulley figures, and the carts, and then the wall piece. I see those all working together. So it's really interesting to kind of pull away and say, okay, does all of these things make sense? And I think it's just hard for me sometimes to say, okay, I'm going to do all carts, or I'm going to do all figures, or I'm going to do all this. I think they all, to me, read as part of my journey. So what started to happen is, as my grandparents transitioned, what I was finding, and my father, is that we were always trying to figure out, what do we do with the houses? Who's moving in the house? Who should be able to move in the house? And I think that happens a lot in families, especially if some of the siblings don't live in the city where the parents live. I think there's a tug of war, and you feel you have this infighting. You also have, who's going to do what. And so what sometimes happens is the buildings just get the houses just get boarded up, and then they start to disintegrate before us. And so and then there are other reasons why you're seeing these kind of structures. It could be from eviction. It could be just a number of things that have happened, gentrification. And so I've been really looking at a lot of these houses, and they've been inspiring the next body of work. So these pieces you're seeing now, these are relics. This is my relic series. And I was really impacted greatly when my grandmother passed away, and then my aunt passed away. But what had happened is my grandmother had a lot of these ceramic forms. And maybe that's why I'm a ceramic artist today, because I spent many, many, many years with my grandmother and a lot of time with her just in her house. And so some of these are pieces that came from her house that she had in there. So how I imagine is trying to capture the spirit of not only the piece, but to capture the spirit of her, and try to create these structures that were open but closed as well. So it's kind of creating this intimate space for these pieces to exist, as well as showing their referencing the house. So you can see that some of the ceramic decals, they look like wallpaper. That was very big at least in the 60s. So I have a series of these that I made. This is another one. This is actually one of her pieces. And what was interesting about my grandmother, she didn't discriminate. She had figurines from all cultures, African, she had Chinese, all the Asian countries, European countries. So it didn't matter to her, because she was a domestic and she would clean other people's houses, and she would see how they decorated. And I think she was certainly influenced by that. But she didn't get her pieces from places like major department stores. She would get her pieces from Salvation Army and Goodwill. And so I didn't feel terribly bad about breaking some of these pieces and fusing them into the piece. And so this one was directly related to what has happened, with tearing down the Confederate statues and everything. So this is a Confederate soldier in Old Durham County. And so this has been happening a lot, especially around Black Lives Matter. It was happening quite frequently. And people questioning what to do with these monuments. What should we tear them down? Should we melt them? Should we store them somewhere? And I still think there's a lot of questions circling around that, because it's history, but at the same time, is this the kind of history that we want to represent who we are as a people, having learned new information. This piece here, it's a triptych. And another thing I do with found ceramics or recycled ceramics is when I see that, I sometimes will build a narrative around what's on that plate, the image that's on the plate. And when I saw these three saucers, I said, oh, this is really talking about the transatlantic slave. What was happening with them is bringing them from West Africa, bringing them all the way over to the United States. And so you can see the sails, the ships and everything. And I thought I could really build a narrative around this. You see those contour mask drawings, those are my actual drawings that I do. And you can see those are the same ones that I used in the colored cut paper. So I'm trying to continue to build my own vocabulary of images and use those in my work. I'm just trying to advance it. Yeah, so this is just a detail. So you can kind of see, and those photographs are actually my son's photographs. And so I use those as well. And I really like the accidents that happen when I fire the piece. So you can see to the left, you can see how that photograph got a little pitted there. And it broke over the bisque slip. So I put a bisque slip in there. So that really helped it kind of open that up. This is hostile passing and passing over. That's the Breonna Taylor. So oftentimes I'm looking at and thinking about things that are happening in the news. And this just really struck a chord in me. That not only it's just a continuation, like Black Lives Matter, that's a continuation of something that has just happened over and over and over again. And I just felt compelled to use her image, a contour drawing of her, and really think about how I can, you know, make a statement about what has happened in our history. These are some other forms that I'm using. They're certainly more geometric. They're just they have a different feel to them. But I'm still thinking about abandonment. And so you can see how that form is open on the backside, how it's kind of, there's some positive and negative spaces. And I'm still very much interested in design and patterns. So this is just an installation shot, a couple of the pieces. And then, you know, when we had the NCECA exhibition, I organized an exhibition, and unfortunately I was unable to participate in it because my partner had quadruple bypass surgery, so I couldn't go. He's alive and well though. But anyhow, I started this new series, and it was based on Beloved, because, you know, Beloved, that story took place in Kentucky and Ohio. And so I thought this would be a great exhibition, to really, that being the theme of the exhibition. And so this house was built directly from that book. So I really focused on that. So it's really kind of like this heated barn, but it's not really heated. So it just talks about one of the stops that Sethi did, one of the characters in the book. It really talks about a place where she was on her journey to freedom. And so that kind of started these structures that were kind of uneven. The structures were turned upside down. So it's still a house, but it's just very open. It's kind of the remains of the house. And you know, that it's also gone through a lot of change, a lot of pain and suffering as well. And then I started kind of doing this beating thing. So I would build these structures and I would just take a mallet and beat it. And I just feel like that's what's happening. That's part of the story. And in terms of talking about what happened to those individuals, or what may have happened to those individuals who were occupying the house. These are really straight out of the kiln, everybody. I was invited to participate in a cup show. And of course, I'm not going to make a cup like other people would make a cup. I got to make it like Lydia would make a cup. And so what I would do is create a cradle to hold these cups. And so these are the one to the left. I actually made that cup when I was at a residency at the Medalta Art Center in Canada. And I just kept it, and it's a salt-fired piece. And so I said, okay, and it's been sitting on the shelf, and I said, okay, how are you going to, it's time for you to do something with this. And so it's great when things come to you like that. So that's where that piece came from. The one to the right it's a combination of things. It's me going to secondhand stores. It's me looking at the inventory from my grandmother, from my mother and sister. And so it's kind of a combination of things. That little bowl there, actually, I bought that when I was in Jinnajing, China, and I cracked it, and I said, okay, I'm not going to throw this away. I got to figure out how to work it into something. And so I'm still dealing with the same concept of you know, abandoned homes, what's left. And what I'm finding is that somehow dishes and things survive that. And I think they survive it because these types of dishes were only used during holidays, during Thanksgiving and Christmas. These are oftentimes the things you find in secondhand stores. That's why there's so much of those things. And this is just another one. And so it's just, you know, I'm trying not to turn into that person that every time I pick up something, oh yeah, I can use that for that. But I can. And so I try to hold on to things, but then I kind of get nervous about it because I don't want to turn into that person who can't get rid of something. And so, but I am finding ways to use the objects that I'm collecting. So I feel good about that. So these pieces are new. That's why they're photographed in the house. And but these are going to a show in Louisiana. These are very new pieces. That's why I don't have good slides of them. These are just studio slides. But I just wanted to show the process in terms of, you know, just thinking about how I'm bringing furniture from the interiors to support the structures. So, you know, I'm on the fence about this. These are works in progress. I'm not quite done with them yet, but I just wanted to show the building technique, the way I build on the inside before I start adding the pieces on the outside. So this piece is done in terms of it's being glazed and everything. It's just trying to make a decision. Am I going to use this table as part of the piece, or should it sit on a pedestal? And these are pretty recent pieces, and just kind of explaining how things can get away from you. Like this piece here, it was not supposed to be this at all. It just accidentally happened. And, you know, I think you can have those accidents. You can do that when you have the chance to let your mind be freed and just to work. And it's kind of like what, you know, what Anna has done, and Rebecca and Sana, all of you have done these residencies where you can just kind of be free and not be something that, okay, I got to have 5 pieces. You know, it's really about just working and seeing what happens. So this is what happens. And I'm really interested in the direction that this work is going right now. Oh, and then this is the second one. I'm still working on this one. I'm almost done. But these are probably about, so if you were to take the top of your head and probably to your waist, they're about that size, and they're pretty broad pieces. And I think of these as being kind of the post Adobe house. This is something I would imagine being in an urban environment, that, you know, this is what a townhouse might look like versus what they look like now. But this is, you know, they're soft, you know, you can see how the strips are kind of very relaxed going over the top of it. And so I'm really interested in kind of creating that, I would say, animated or organic form that's structure plus figure. So kind of combining the and structure, trying to combine those two things together. And so I'm going to move a little bit because, you know, I do understand we have some students with us today. So these are the things that I'm always saying to my students about, you know, skilled, career ready individual. That's kind of what you need to be. And I think what we do in the classroom and what we need to do in our studio practice and everything is critical thinking and problem solving. And that's just making a glaze. I saw our students do that today, you know, just making glazes, communications, you know, really being able to talk about your work, technical skills, collaborate, understand that our studio is a collaboration. It's about community, you know, stand out, be innovative, and think about creativity and inspiration, and do whatever to keep the flame burning, whatever that is. Be productive and stay positive, and never compare yourself to others. But, you know, it's hard not to do that because, you know, we're in a field where you do have to think about what other people are doing. So these are things, I put this in here for the students, not for us professionals. And then something that you got to constantly update is your artist statement, your bio, your resume. Think about what your work is about, provide the descriptions of your work and your references. So I wanted to just show a few of the students' work just to see what they're doing. This is the organic abstract project they're doing. And the student to the left, you can see there's one that's kind of collapsed. And so she was gonna throw that away. I said, oh, no way. I said, we're gonna make a slab. We're gonna roll out a slab and we're gonna fire that baby up and we're gonna go nuts with the glazes. I said, no way, we're keeping that. So she did. She was pretty excited about that. And, you know, it's different. This is all the same assignment, but these are just students, have been so creative this semester. I'm really pleased with their progress. This is one of my colleagues, Tom Schmidt, and one of my students, Lena, and we're using the Cricut. So just trying to introduce as much technology as possible. We did the Darrow Willard project. That's what I call it. You know, she was at Women Working in Clay, and she was one of the demonstrators, and she was just, her surfaces are just explosive. And so I wanted to teach her technique to our students. So this is them making stencils. And then we also did a study abroad trip to France, Limoges, France. So this is couple of my students. They're working in the studio. You can see they're slip casting, and then they're pulling out the casting and cleaning it up. This is just their first project, a lidded container, and I'm so apologize for this. I do have, the works are finished. They're in the showcases right now, but I for some reason didn't take photos of those. But these are beginning students, and you know, some of them, their skills, they're just impeccable. So they've done a really wonderful job on this first project. These are some of my advanced students' work where they have to do a series. So they did these decayed animal skulls, the one to the right, and the other one they had to do a wall piece. Another project that we do is an inanimate object. So these are this is a photography student, and she wanted to do a regular 35 millimeter. I said, nope, can't do that. I need mass volume. So she actually did the 4x5 camera, and she incorporated one of the artists, surrealist artist, Salvador Dali's. So that's what she was influenced by, his work. This is another one. And actually, Sana, you met her. She came with Women Working in Clay, Lily. And so she was doing a casting project. This is all slip cast. This is an interior exterior wall form assignment. So you can see this is very alien-like. This is a really large piece. Oh, good. I'm hearing somebody. Yay. And then these are just some research and career opportunities. These are some of my students who are doing really well. Ayana Moore, she was at Virginia Commonwealth University, went on to get her MFA at Tyler School of Art and Design. She's a tenured faculty at Carnegie Mellon University and at the Art Institute. She still works at the Art Institute, but she teaches, and she's maintaining a studio there. So she's doing extremely well. Another one of my students, Kenya Best. And so, you know, these are people who have maintained a studio practice, but they also have, you know, they're doing other types of work. So she's the on the road coordinator. So they take this huge semi, you can see that to the right, and they go around to all these small towns, and they open this trailer up, and they have art in there. They'll either open it up and it'd be kind of like a short-term museum or gallery where they're bringing some original artwork or copies of original artwork to towns that don't have museums or large galleries. And she also just recently received a commission to do Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears' portrait. Another one, this is Alexis. Oh, excuse me, everybody. Alexis McGrigg, she received her undergrad at Mississippi State University and her master's from Texas Tech University. She kind of followed me. I met her when I was working at Mississippi State University, and I said, well, you should just come to Texas for your graduate degree. And she did, and she's done extremely well. She's received awards for her work and commissions, and grants, and she's doing extremely well. And this is some of her work. She has a gallery now in Paris, France, and she's doing excellent. Yeah. She just received the South Arts Grant Award as well. We built a new Marriott on campus, and so I worked with the folks who were handling all the art for the Marriott, because they wanted our students' work to be in there. So this is students' work that's in the Marriott, in the bathrooms and in the major spaces in the lobbies of the Marriott. So, and I'm sharing this because I think what happens when we talk about being an artist, there are so many components to being an artist to maintain a career. And then I also do some outreach, community outreach, and I worked with the Girls Inc., which is a national organization that works with girls in different areas and communities around the United States. So I had an opportunity to do a workshop with them, and they were just wonderful, just wonderful. And then these are just a few references for my talk. Usually when I'm usually a little more descriptive with the work, but I realize we're on a time schedule here. But these are part of that list of authors that I gave you at the beginning. You know, it's so important to read about your work and understand where you find your work and where we are today, and how you think you would want to leave your work. Where do you want it to be? And I think that's it.
Okay, that was awesome. I'm going to jump in. Even though maybe I shouldn't, but super beautiful work. I also appreciated like all of the context and the concept behind it. And also like being vulnerable and saying, I'm not sure about this new work. Amazing. Also, one of my students just Monday brought in a book that featured your work prominently, Black American ceramic artist, super beautiful. But anyway, I'm gonna not go on and on. But so I've been looking into, I've run into a few exhibitions and of those face jugs, and like I've not been able to find very much information about it, and like the historical face jugs that the enslaved people use. Could you talk about that history?
Yeah, they're mostly, you find them mostly in South Carolina and those regions, and they would put them on the grave sites, and that was really to scare away any kind of negative haunts or demons, so the loved one could pass over into the next life.
Also, like protecting the spirit, kind of.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, that's why they look so gruesome. Like that.
Okay.
You didn't get to see that face, did you?
Oh, I missed it. Oh, good. Thank you.
Actually, the teeth that they put in there, that's just kaolin. The teeth and the eyes, that's just kaolin that they would put in there because they could fire them, right? Yeah.
That's super cool.
Thanks for asking.
So, Lydia, thank you for this. This is great. And because it encompasses, it's your work and your life and it just, everything's all interconnected. Because so often I think it's just natural for us to kind of separate all those out. But in seeing your presentation, I get a real sense of all of this melding together. And I was just curious about what you're thinking about for your next, like maybe next series of work or project or thing that you want to be doing.
I didn't share that with you all today because again, I'm still kind of like, it's called Mumblings, and they are a group of birds, because I think birds, they oftentimes, because they're migrating and there's so many different types of birds, that they kind of, for me, symbolize the whole migration of how we move back and forth. And they're going to be, the way I'm thinking of presenting them is they're going to be on these little tables, side tables that you find in your grandmother's house, or I won't say mothers anymore because I think I'm in the mother stage and I'm pretty contemporary, but those historical small tables, side tables. And so I just imagine these birds creating these, I guess, environments that look like fragments of houses and rooms, and that they're all in there together because they're talking about things that they couldn't really discuss with their children. So what I did was I've been doing this research about migration, and particularly focusing on those individuals who are from in their 70s and 80s, and perhaps 90s, but the ones who have migrated, they migrated during that time where they're not migrating to like these large metropolitan areas. They're migrating to kind of, I guess, the second level of in terms of population, like Columbus, Ohio, or, Detroit, Michigan. So, or some of them stayed in the South, but just really talking to them about, like the questions we're asking them or something like, well, what were you doing? What did your parents tell you about the civil rights? Because I think when we think of civil rights, we always think about the riots in the major cities. But, there's always been microaggression that has happened to people. And so how did they survive that as well? Because a lot of times in these interviews, they're telling me that their parents really created a bubble for them to exist in. And so they were warning them about not going out late at night, not being by yourself, all of those things, but they basically put their children in a bubble. And so they protected them against the racism and not wanting them to listen to all the anger and everything, because they didn't want their children to go out and start rioting and doing the same things. So they were soldiers in a different way. They were soldiering in a different way that we don't typically hear about. And so that was fascinating to me to figure out how they survived all of that. And so some of them have some really interesting stories to tell. So I'm using some of those videos that will be part of this installation that I'll do. I have a solo exhibition coming up at Clay Art Center in Port Chester, New York in April. So I'm putting that all together, and I'll also have a soundtrack.
Well,
So that's a long story.
Yeah.
That's a long description. I apologize for that.
We have a large group of students here.
Oh my
and
God, I'm so
anybody
impressed.
have a question?
Santa does, though.
I know she does, but I wanted to just give the students, since we've been just 1 second. Is there any student that's here today would like to ask a question? And then if not, we'll move on to Sana, but we're happy to have any questions you may have. Comments? Okay, well then, Sana, you want to go ahead?
Yes, Lydia, I want to know, and my students are coming in, so I probably can't stay to listen to your long explanation, but it's a question that I always have, and I'm always rethinking about how to respond to this. But the question that I had very recently from a student was, why do artists of color always talk about their marginalization, their history, oppression? I'm a white artist. I don't talk about being white. What would be your response to that, or begin to be your response to that?
Well, that's a great question, because I don't think I would ever ask a white artist why they don't speak more about some of the things that I'm talking about, because our experience is an American experience. And that I think you speak about what you know, and not all African American artists talk about those things in their work. I think you speak to your experiences. I know there's an what do you call a bird, the people who study birds, ornithologists? Yeah. And he's talking about bird watching while Black. And so even he is the thing that we should be enjoying as an individual, just a human being living on this earth. Even he's impacted by that. But I just feel like when someone asked me that question, because somebody asked me a question similar to that about, does your work have to be about culture? I said, well, all work we make is about culture. And you can ask the same question of why the Greeks spent so much time, you know, making work about war or, you know, soldiers. I mean, you could do any of that. I think there are people who talk about gender in their work. There are people who talk about travel. There are people who talk about space. I think I would never be compelled to ask a person a question that, well, why do you just do landscapes? Because that's the same kind of question. You know, why are you just painting trees all the time? You know, and I just feel like I paint it because it's something that I'm interested in, or I make it because this is what I'm interested in. This is where I am right now. And it should be that simple. I don't think I need to provide a long explanation. Well, you know, it's because of my people, we need this. No, this is what I'm interested in right now. This is the headspace I'm in, and this is what's important to me. And I think people make work that's important to them, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that should be enough. That should be enough of a reason for someone to want to go in the studio every day. And there may be a time where, and the work is about more than that. Like your work is about trees, it's about landscape, it's about where you find these trees. You make these really great trees. I was like, boy, I would really love to find those trees in this world somewhere. Where are those trees? You know, and they probably do exist somewhere because we haven't been to every place in this world. So they're probably out there. But right now they're in the imagination world.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, it's about time, but any last questions, especially any of the students that are in the group have a last question or comment? Sam, any comments?
Yeah, Lydia, that was fantastic.
Fantastic.
And I think you've had a lot of students joining today as well. It means that we are building audience as we move on. And I'm super excited that you were able to show works of your students and where they are.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, as a teacher or as a, do you see influences of your pedagogy, what you teach and the way you teach in their practice now? And
are you saying do the students feed me as well? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, do you see some influences of what you like the experience, like the question Anna Sana asked? I believe as artists we produce what we experience, and yes, we produce what we experience, and whatever we go through shapes us and shapes our thinking, and we speak to these issues, and that's why maybe I think you answered it very well, and I'm just adding to it. But I'm also saying, as you came to Africa, your experience with architecture and stuff, your illustrating experiences, you keep on moving to one material, you go in, you come back, you go in, you come back. These things, these materials have influences in your design thinking, and did that want to influence some of your students and their way of practice?
I haven't really seen that from them yet. I haven't really seen the influence. What I will say, the takeaway or what I see that I'm being impactful for is their drive. So they're really driven now. And you know, and I've even some of them come in a little late, or you know, they leave a little early for class. And I says, you know what? I don't even care about that. I said, what I care about is what you pull off of that shelf and you're working on. So I said, that speaks volumes. You know, you can come in 10, 15, 20 minutes late. So I think the energy, I think they're feeling my energy, which is what I want. That's what I want to give them, my energy. And I oftentimes say to them, don't, like if they're taking other studio classes or whatever, I says, don't leave that on the shelf. Don't say, okay, I'm painting, I leave that there. Now I'm in my ceramics class. It's like, no, bring the painting, bring the graphic design, bring all that to class when you come.
So you allow them to bring in all ideas and stuff, and that's what I'm talking about. So you still have an influence, which is good.
Yeah,
which is good. What will you tell my students back home in Ghana? They might be a little bit shy. They have their questions, and I'm sure they've listened to you. And there's a lot. I'm sure Anna will share the file with us, and we'll go over it. But what will you tell these students who are studying ceramics and
Two things.
the way forward.
Be present, and be intentional. So, and admit, you know, like and what I mean by intentional is admit that you failed, you know, don't skirt around it. You know, failure is part of the process. So be intentional, be present. And being present means you're present right now. You're here. You decided to join this lecture. That's being present, you know. And sometimes you don't know what the takeaway is. You know, you got to think about it and you got to go back and look at something, but just be present, you know, be present and be intentional. And those two things will get you so far in life, you know. So that's what I would leave. Just
that's perfect, Lydia. Perfect. I would
wonderful.
Wonderful.
Go ahead.
I would just add on perseverance.
Yeah, but I was thinking the same thing. That's been my motto.
Perseverance. You know what I mean?
Keep at it.
and another thing that you know that we've talked about all our lives together is that in our craft and in our lives and in our journeys, we do stop, but we don't quit. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
We can stop for a moment, but we don't quit.
Right.
So that's something I tell students. Yes, I've stopped, but I've never quit.
Right. That's beautiful, Sana. And I will say that, and I said, don't put your life on hold. I mean, I don't know how I did it, but I managed to have a couple of kids in all of it too. So they're 29 and 31 and they're doing all right, you know.
And they're nice people.
Yeah, they're nice people. And that's what I wanted. I just wanted to have nice people in this world. That was my goal when I brought them into the world. Just nice guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sam, another thing, I think friendship. I just came back from being with Leah at Wilson in North Carolina. And she started by saying, Sana and I have been friends 40 years. Lydia, you and I have been friends 40 years. We must hold hands.
I know.
Hold hands.
Yeah, those friendships last forever. And I've been knowing Anna for a little while, and I just remember Rebecca and her really cool creatures, you know, that they look innocent, but I don't know, you get close enough to them, they might bite you. But I remember her work years ago. She was one of the emerging artists when I was on the board of NCCA, so it was really wonderful.
Thank you.
It's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in forever.
Oh, now I get to finally meet you. It's so cool. This is amazing. Thank you, everyone, for all.
I gotta go, you guys.
Okay.
My student will leave.
All right. See you later.
Love you,
Probably
Lydia.
time